Welcome back to the second part of the Sci-Fi Week tutorial. My name is Eran Stern, and this time we'll take the outcome of part 1, which you can see here, and create a special space projection coming out of a flying saucer, plus a couple of more tricks and enhancements. So, are you ready to go where no one has gone before? Me neither. But anyway, let's begin our trek. I will go out of full screen, and what we want to do now is take basically our elements that we did before and use it as a screen projection. For that, let's close everything and start to create a new comp. Press the new comp icon and choose a PAL widescreen square pixel. I will leave the duration at 10 seconds and name this final comp. Choose OK. First, let's drag our stars_2 background. Once again, this is an image taken by the Hubble telescope, and you can download it from the NASA website, and we will use this amazing picture as our background. First, I will start with scaling it a little bit, so by pressing S I can access the scale attributes, and let's start with 70%. And just give it a subtle animation from beginning to end. So place a keyframe at the first frame, go to the last one, and just raise it to 80%. So we'll have a nice zoom in animation, something which will help our background not to stand still in place. Now let's drag our screen element to the comp, and also I would like to drag in the flying saucer picture. So this is a picture of a toy which I actually took, and since it looks like a classic saucer, I thought it will fit nicely to the story that we are trying to tell here. For a moment I will turn off the eye for it and just return to the screen, and what we like to do is create some old TV look. Now if you look into the cow library, you will find couple of tutorials that explain how to do it. There is a great one from Aaron Rabinowitz, but I will use a shortcut here and just modify it a little bit. So in the effects and presets, just start to type bed TV, and you will get an animation presets that ships with Adobe After Effects. There are 3 here, and I already examined them and come to the resolution that bed TV old will fit nicely to our project. So just drag the preset on top of the screen and let it work, and you will see that we are getting some bed TV interference. I will not touch any of the plugins here except for the last one, which is the Venetian blind, and I think that I will change the width, which I should raise to, I think, 8, which should yield more lines in between. But this is basically the look that I'm after. Now, to give it a dimensional 3D in space, let's convert our layer to a 3D layer. And let's just stand here at 3 seconds where we can see all our elements in view. And then take the rotate tool and just start to rotate it on its x-axis, something like this, and then maybe scale it 60 or 65%, something which should look nice. Then you can return to the arrow tool by pressing the V and just place it somewhere here. Now this preset is already animated, so if you will generate a quick run preview, you can see the bed TV interference. But we want to modify it a little bit so it would look a little bit more jagged and actually projected in space. So let's just zoom out a little bit. Working in half resolution is a good way to start. And then let's make sure we can see the blend mode and just change this layer to an additive blend mode. This will look like a projected screen. And for getting more details and interesting look, I will duplicate this layer and take the second copy and change its blend mode to overlay. So we've got a nice mix between those two. I will also press T and lower the second copy to maybe 50%. So now we've got nice projected feel to it. And maybe I will also do the same for the upper layer, maybe lower it to say 65%, something which will reveal the background behind. Now I want to treat the hard edges, so I will do it just for the upper layer by going to the mask icon, the rectangle tool, and just double click on it. This will place a mask around the whole layer. And then let's open the mask properties, use the mask expansion, and maybe chunk it a little bit to maybe minus 20 pixels. And then let's raise the feather a little bit. So while we are seeing both of them, you can see that we've got some nice shadow at the edges. To simplify the process, I will select both screen layer and go under layer and choose pre-compose. I will name this screen pre-comp and choose to move all attributes into the new composition and say OK. Now, since we did this pre-comp procedure, we lost the blend modes of our layer. So in order to get them back, toggle the switches and press the collapse transformation. This will read the blend modes which are existing inside this comp. Remember the one that we did, the add and the overlay. Now we are ready to introduce the flying saucer back to our scene and create some nice animation. So let's select it and maybe scale it a little bit down. We need to place it, I think, somewhere over here, maybe a little bit more. And let's create a simple animation for it. So let's go to 0 and take the flying saucer layer out of the screen, press P and record the keyframe in position. Then move on to 1 second in the timeline and just drag it back to its place. Now I want to also drag the handles here on both sides, so just create a nice S shape. And if you like, you can also play a little bit with the rotation. So maybe minus 5 degrees, something like this should be enough. And you can close the layer. Now we want to create the projection from the screen itself. So for that, let's come back to the project panel and just drag another copy of the screen and place it in the timeline. In order to create the projection itself, we will need to pre-compose the layer. So let's go to layer and choose again pre-compose. This time we'll call it projection and choose to open the new composition and move all attributes into the new one. So select open and now select the screen and just scale it to maybe half size, something like this, and place it on the left side of the screen. In order to generate the projection itself, we will use a nice effect. So start to type light, close the animation presets and just drag the CC light burst into the comp. But we don't want to drag it just on top of this layer. We want to create an adjustment layer and then drag the effect on top of the adjustment layer. So now we have the light burst effect, and if you place your cursor in the center, you can drag to see what it's doing. And what we need to do is basically place this center of the effect outside of the comp and then raise the intensity and the ray length to a very high number, which will produce a nice projected feel into our scene. But we might need to move this center even further to the left because we need as much projection as we can do. So maybe something like this, and you can of course examine it in maybe other places to see that we've got all the colors. And if you feel that you need more, you can again raise the intensity or the ray length as much as you need. I think that I will go a little bit back and maybe set the intensity to 500 and the ray length maybe to 150. So this will be our projection. Now, when we come back to the final comp, we can see the projection is in place, but it is of course flipped. So all we need to do here is press S and get the scale properties and flip it. Or if you're working like me in CS4, you can select the layer, right click on it, and then under transform, you have an option named flip horizontal, which will do exactly the same. Now you can close the layer and just drag it and place it where the projection should start. Now you might need to tweak it a little bit because as you can see, it doesn't really start from the border of the spaceship. So what we can do here is, of course, press R and give it first the same rotation. Remember, it was -5, but we flipped it, so this time it should be +5. And this fixes it a little bit better. But if you really want to do it correctly, you can also add to this layer the corner pin effect. And then just drag the pins themselves until you see that you've got the right perspective. So something like this, I think, will work nicely. And then again, you can come back to the switchers, toggle the modes, and change the projection blend mode to add, which really add to the projection field that we have here. Now I want to create the look that the projection will reveal itself while the saucer is in the screen. So select the flying saucer layer, hit U to see the keyframes, and while we are here, let's select both of them and hit F9 to easy ease the motion. And here the flying saucer is settled in, so maybe a few frames after, we will take the projection and start to draw a mask to reveal it. So you can choose the pen tool or the rectangular tool, whatever fits. Just double click the rectangular tool in my case, and let's double click in order to reveal it in place. So from this point of time, we don't want to see anything. Let's open the mask properties, click the mask path in order to create a keyframe, move further few frames, doesn't really need to be more than 5 or 6 frames. Then double click the mask once again and reveal it in its full glory. And then in order to generate a nice smooth look here, you can add a 50 pixels feather in order to generate a nice smooth look. And this is all we need to do here. So now we've got our flying saucer settles in and start the projection. And if you need, you can press U and maybe tweak those keyframes in order to make them a little bit more tight, so the action will be a little bit more quicker. Now, when it will reach this point, I want to create something similar, but maybe a little different. So in order to do it, we can go under Effect and under Transition and select the CC Light Wipe effect. But as soon as we will add an effect to a collapse transformation pre-comp, it will lose its properties. So let's just toggle back and change it to screen over here, so we'll get more or less the same look that we have before. Now we are free to play with the CC Light Wipe in order to generate the look that we are after. So place the center here at the center of the screen. And then we will need to play with the completion and change few of the parameters. The first thing is to sample the colors from the source, and the second is to reverse the transition, because actually we want it to draw itself on the screen. So something like this will yield a nice transition. So let's just make sure that nothing is visible here. Once these rays are approaching it, and record the keyframe for the completion, then maybe move forward few frames, doesn't have to be a long transition, and just drag the completion until we will see the whole screen in its full glory. And then just make sure that the timing is right. So you can of course play with it a little bit and just make sure, if you need, you can always press U and just, drag these keyframes a little bit further away so the projection will look interesting. So let's just check what we have until now. We will close everything and we will create a quick run preview. So we have the first part of this looking very good. Now let's give it a little bit more life and maybe add few more sorcerers in the background. In order to do it quickly, I will use the same parenting trick we use in the first part. So select everything except of the stars background. So basically it's the two layers here, and just use the pick whip to parent both of them to the flying saucer. So when the flying saucer now will move, it will take all the elements with it. So what we want to do here is press P in order to see the position properties, and these are the keyframes already in place, and I want to add to this a little bit of a wiggle motion. So holding down Alt or Option and clicking on the stopwatch, and let's just type down wiggle open parentheses 1,60. So very nice and smooth wiggle, which I think should really help to sell this effect. So the saucer itself is wiggling in place and everything is coming along to the trip thanks to the parenting. So let's just watch the few seconds, and yes, this looks very, very interesting. So what we want to do now, after we have those wiggles in place, is make sure to enable motion blur for the flying saucer and maybe for the layers themselves. And before we will enable the motion blur for the whole layer, let's just take the flying saucer clip and duplicate it. So we'll have another copy, press P in order to see the keyframes, and move to one of the keyframes and then select both of them. So now we can actually move both of them in place. And let's just place this copy over here, scale it a little bit down so this will be a little bit further away. Let's add to it the levels effect and also the fast blur. So both effects are in place. And now just expand it a little bit so you can see, and just play a little bit with the output white so it will darken the layer. Then go to the fast blur and add few pixels of blur, maybe 7 or 8 should do the trick. And make sure it will be under our original saucer, so it will look like it's behind everything. So a little bit underneath all layers except of course for the background. And I think we might want to play a little bit with the position, so maybe a little bit more closer to our scene, something like this. And just to make it more interesting, select the layer and once again duplicate another copy. So now we have 3 of them. Select this copy and let's place it maybe somewhere here. Scale this one to even tinier, and for this we might want to darken it a little bit more and raise the blurriness even further, so this will look further in space. So I think this looks very nice. What we also want to do is maybe change the timing. So just drag these layers on the timeline so it doesn't look like everything is happening at the same time. Create a RAM preview and you will see first saucer coming in and then the last 2 saucers are getting inside the scene, and each one of them has its own wiggle effect because the wiggle is calculated by the index number of the layer. So we have a nice variation going around. So this is basically it. We are almost ready for the final RAM preview. The last thing that I want to do is return to the project panel, and over here I've got titles.mov, which is a pre-rendered file. Let me just open and show you what it is. And you can see that we have our Sci-Fi Classics Weekends at 10 p.m. and I've generated these titles using the 3D abilities of the new Boris Continuum Complete. I'm not going to cover how I did it because it is out of the scope of this tutorial, but I really recommend you to check out Boris Effects website. They have over there a few tutorials which covers most of the options in the new 3D extruded text, and I think these are great plugins. But if you don't have it, you can download a free copy which will work fully for 2 weeks, so you can experiment and examine it in more depth. But in this stage, I will just drag it to my timeline, make sure it will be aligned to the end of the timeline here, because the titles will just go here somewhere around 4 seconds. And then I will make sure I will activate the motion blur to every layer. And now that I can see it, I think that I might want to add a drop shadow so the titles will stand up a little bit better. So just make sure we will see the last frame. go under layer, and under layer styles you can add a drop shadow to the whole layer, and then open the drop shadow and just play with it. I think that I will just change the size here so the drop shadow will be a little bit more smooth, and maybe lower the opacity to 65%, and that's it, we are done. This is the whole treatment I wanted to do to the titles. So let's move back to our first frame, hover on top of the composition and just hit the tilde T and create our final ramp preview to check the result. So after all this hard work, I think you are deserved to some cheesy classic sci-fi movie of your liking. So go now and watch your favorite one, or tune up tonight at 10 PM for our show. Whatever you choose, I hope you remember that now you have the force and the talent to create your own amazing graphics for it. Thank you for staying with me so late on this long episode, and I hope you have a safe trip back to Earth. Until next time we'll meet, this is Eran Stern for CreativeCow.net saying goodbye.